Hello viewers, I'm Colleen and this is Emily, and we are both reporters from Charles Sturt University.
Today we'll be speaking to Jessica Head, a pre-service teacher who has just completed her final professional placement and internship.
We will be reflecting on her role as a teacher and a researcher.
I'd like to welcome Jessica.
Thank you for having me today, Emily and Colleen.
How are you?
I'm great, thanks.
That's good. How about we start with you telling us a little bit about your research?
Alright, so for the past 9 weeks, I've been conducting a study in a 5-6 class. My proposed research question was, what strategies can teachers use to promote self-regulation, and will promoting these strategies change students' approach and view towards learning? Basically, I wanted to know whether implementing effective self-regulating strategies will change students' perspective towards learning.
What does it mean to be a researcher to you?
Well, as clearly stated in Stringer in Action, Research and Education, research provides the basis for formulating effective solutions to significant classroom and school problems. Through research, teachers can gain an understanding on how to better their teaching practice in areas which they feel have gaps and tensions.
Did you have any interesting aspects in your research on self-regulation strategies and students' views towards learning?
I found the whole process of conducting a study to be both interesting and daunting. Initially, I had no clue how to conduct the research, so I read up on literature articles, and through breaking down the proposal and how to conduct a study, I gained a better understanding.
Okay, did you find anything else interesting?
Creating my question and doing my own study and making my own resources for my own chosen methods made me feel in control of my own learning. Throughout the research, I was able to investigate my topic and answer the question all by myself.
So you felt proud of your research and final results?
Yeah, because I did it all by myself.
That's great. Now onto a different aspect of your research. What sort of challenges did you experience along the way?
Well, along the way, I experienced a range of challenges when I was conducting my study. My main challenge was being organised and following my set out timeline, and ensuring that I completed all tasks by the specified time. Being on internship and having other commitments and responsibilities kind of distracted me from my study, and at times I forgot to do it.
So how did you resolve this challenge?
I decided to print out my timeline and stick it into my daybook so that every time I opened my daybook, it was right there and I could see what I had to do and I wouldn't forget.
I would have thought you'd self-regulate yourself and be able to do the work.
Well, that's kind of why I chose this topic, because I wanted to work on my own self-regulating skills, because I'm not very self-regulated myself, and in relation to completing assessments, I usually left it to the last minute. So hopefully from this study I wanted to learn some more self-regulating skills for my own benefit.
Well, at least you didn't start this one the day before it's due. You must have learnt some successful self-regulation strategies.
Were there any other challenges that you experienced?
I did have other issues that were challenging in my research. Finding my educational problem was simple, because as I said, I wanted to do something that was relevant to me, and self-regulation was an important factor I had to work on in becoming a teacher. And there wasn't much of a challenge in regards to finding gaps and tensions in current literature, because it was clear to see that not many articles were based around primary school students in Australia. I did have a challenge though in deciding on which paradigm I wanted to use. Currently, most articles used a quantitative paradigm, which used quantitative methods as well, which meant that theorists wanted a certain answer and were not open to subjective or alternative views. So based off these gaps, I was able to develop my research question.
So what method did you end up using?
As I said, initially I wanted to use a quantitative method because I thought it would be easier with the results, because it'd be easier to make a final judgment because it was clear to see, and finish my report because it was easier.
Always looking for the easy way out.
Well, what do you expect? I am a uni student.
That is true.
But then I thought about it and I thought a quantitative paradigm wouldn't be as appropriate as a qualitative paradigm, because if I did use a qualitative framework, then I would be able to get results which are open to discussion and would allow me, the researcher, to explore alternative views and various perspectives in regards to self-regulation. And after much consideration and thinking, I settled on using an interpretive method. to show how a specific classroom setting responds to self-regulation strategies being implemented.
And what about the collection of data? Did you have any challenges in this area of your studies?
Not really. The methods I used to gather data were semi-structured interviews, semi-structured observations and field notes, classroom artifacts, and a reflective learning journal were easy to put together and analyse at the end. I didn't have to worry about any risk towards my participants or confidentiality issues because I was the only one that was looking at the data and I was the only one that would be analysing it.
So what were some of the implications for the classroom practice? Why is your research so vital to the classroom?
From observations in classrooms and through reading scholarly journals, I noticed that procrastination, inadequate work responses, an absence of motivation, and lack of effort from students has been a major problem in education. It is important to promote self-regulating skills in students because students who are in an academic environment where they are taught self-regulated skills from a young age will grow up using these skills naturally.
Okay, go on.
Some other implications for classroom practice can include all students need to take responsibility for their own learning, and teaching self-regulating strategies will do this. Also, a teacher's main goal is to get students to become motivated learners who persist and put their own efforts into their learning, rather than having the mindset that I have to do this work, otherwise I'm going to get in trouble from my parents or teachers. We want to promote intrinsic motivation in our students for them to want to learn for themselves.
So Jessica, overall, how has this study informed you in respect to your teaching practice?
When I first arrived at my prac school, my 5-6 class had no self-regulation. And through interviews with them, I noticed that the only reason that they were doing their work was because they didn't want to get in trouble. Would you want to do your work? That's not a good way to think. Yeah, and also the students, out of 25 students, only 6 students were handing their homework back in at the end of the week. That's ridiculous, isn't it? Yeah. So, over the 9 weeks, I implemented self-regulating strategies which I thought were effective and what I was told by other teachers within the school community. By the end, after putting in the reward system and other strategies which I used, more students were returning their homework and were more organised in class, and they were completing their work to a higher standard and more adequately. This showed that students were becoming more self-regulated. And through a final semi-structured interview with the students, I saw that students were becoming more enthusiastic towards learning. And this in the end would start to develop intrinsic motivation within them.
So through implementation of this effective self-regulation strategy, your classroom performed better in all the aspects of learning? Yeah, and those were the results I was aiming for.
That's great.
Yeah, so now I believe that all teachers should teach their students how to become self-regulated learners, because, as I said, it's very important for students to want to learn themselves.
I'm glad to hear your study was such a success. It has been great listening to you reflecting on the teacher and as a researcher.
Well, thank you for having me, Colleen and Emily.
And that, my friends, is a wrap.